Hey guys, welcome back for another video. Today we are going to be talking about bits in Beyblade X, sort of the differences between them, particularly the different typings, so attack, defense, and stamina, and how you can utilize the different parts to change sort of how your Beyblade interacts in the stadium and hopefully improve your combo building. There's two main categories as far as burst resistance goes. That's high burst resistance and low burst resistance at the moment. So the way that you can tell them apart is the high burst resistance has a thicker part on the shaft, and the lower burst resistance does not have that. It's just sort of smoother down the middle. And the way that this works is it puts tension on the inside of the ratchet. So when you have the Beyblade assembled, it makes it harder for that ratchet to rotate. What this means when building combos is that a lot of stamina and defense builds are going to have lower burst resistance unless you're building them with a higher burst resistance bit. So something like Point, which has pretty good stamina, you could throw on sort of a defensive build, and sure, it will move around the stadium a little more, but it will still outspin a lot of attack types that are on flat or rush or even taper. Within the high burst resistance category, most of the bits are attack oriented, and you've got a lot of variation from flat to low flat, rush, taper, point, gear flat, and obviously as the series continues, we're going to end up getting more, but the burst resistance is something that you want to keep in mind when you're building combos. Just because something says defense from Takara or Hasbro doesn't necessarily mean that it's great at defense. So same thing applies to low burst resistance. You've got a lot of variation that's expanding as the series continues, and there's a lot of interesting different parts that interact differently on different builds. So it's something that you want to experiment with, and like I said, the way that Hasbro and Takara labels things isn't necessarily always accurate. So, for example, if you look at Arrow Wizard and Helm Knight and you look at the bits, you'll notice that Ball is only considered marginally better than Needle in terms of stamina. And while most of the categories in terms of what's better and worse when comparing these is fairly accurate, how close the stamina is between the two bits is definitely not. Ball outspins Needle significantly more. So I occasionally get comments asking why I use particular blades for particular builds. Let's say I'm using a blade that is labeled Stamina by Hasbro or Takara, and I'm using it for an attack build. A lot of times that confuses people. So just take the typing that they label the Beyblade as with a grain of salt. Sometimes something that is labeled one way will a lot of times be way better for a different type of build. The two things that I would look at initially when trying to pick a bit for a particular combo or a build that you're working on is whether or not it's high burst resistance and low burst resistance. And then when picking out of those two categories, how the tip actually performs in the stadium. I would completely disregard the way that Takara or Hasbro type something and look at how it actually performs in real life and go from there. The main thing that I always recommend is focus on a type of build that you want to do. So maybe there's a particular blade that you like. Focus on what you want to do with that blade. Maybe it's an attack build, maybe it's a defense build, and go from there. Try it out on different bits, see what works, see what doesn't work. You can solo test. Solo testing is very valuable. A lot of people dismiss it, but it can be very useful for understanding how things interact in a stadium. Is it going to give you the most accurate result in a competitive setting? Not necessarily. However, if something does good in solo testing, it will probably translate okay to a competitive setting as well, as long as your skill matches your opponent. So the one thing that you can't factor in solo testing is how good your opponent's going to be or what they're going to be using. So keep that in mind. Take your solo testing with a grain of salt. If you can, test with an opponent or with a friend, and hopefully you can come up with some cool combos. Let me know your favorite bits down in the comments. Hit the like if you haven't already, subscribe for future Beyblade content, and I will see you all in the next one. And if you guys feel like supporting the channel, feel free to check out my Patreon linked down below, where for a limited time you can get these holographic Max chip stickers. These go right on top of the chip cover for Beyblade X, and this is basically my cat that you see in end screens occasionally. Anyway, thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.